Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Misconceptions. I'm really thrilled to invite back our guest, Eling Tsai, because this is, it's not usual that I bring somebody back two times, but we had finished the conversation. I was like, there is so much more that we need to talk about. So thank you for saying yes to joining me again on our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, our just to jump right in, well, actually, for those who maybe don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit about your profession, who you are, and also where you're located. Because there's always people who are like, well, how can we get in touch with this person? Tell them a little about yourself before we jump right into the conversation.
Yes, totally happy to. So my name is Eling. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm living and working in Brooklyn, New York, in the greater New York City area. And my focus professionally is on eating disorder treatment and prevention. So right now I work in private practice with folks who experience any range of challenges with eating, whether that's just too much thought about eating or something more along the lines of a diagnosed eating disorder. And in nutrition counseling, we usually work uh, alongside people's work with their therapist. Nutrition counseling is a place for people to explore some of their beliefs and assumptions about food. We do a lot of fact checking. We definitely do a lot of processing of recent eating experiences, planning for future ones, and trying to support people in reaching their goals of having a more stress-free relationship with food and their body.
Oh, there's so much in that statement. So much in that statement. Okay. So I want to start with a question. You talked about the idea of prevention. What are when we think about prevention of eating disorders, I want to hear from you a little bit more about like what is the genetic component, predisposition, family of origin stuff, versus the we can actually prevent this from happening.
hmm Yeah, it's a good question. So there's definitely a genetic predisposition. So when I'm meeting a new teen or adult that I'm working with, I'm always asking about their family history of eating disorders just to understand maybe how that is playing a role. Um, but also within that, even if someone is genetically predisposed, it doesn't mean they'll have an eating disorder by any means. I think there's so much that happens environmentally that can really bring forward something like an eating disorder. And then, especially in today's society and sort of media landscape, can really encourage one as well. So I definitely think there's so much benefit to prevention work, like when it comes to how we speak with children and teens about food. Ultimately with the goal of them becoming healthy and regulated adults.
So, like, I guess when I hear about like a disease, there's certain things we can do, I guess, in general. Like, talk this through with me. Like, there's certain things we can do in terms of disease prevention. For example, if I eat healthy, if I eat cardiac healthy foods, then the likelihood is that I can keep my blood pressure low, my weight in a stable zone. I won't necessarily have high cholesterol. So I guess there are some preventative measures when it comes to, developing a disease cardiac issues. Okay. Um, Diabetes, maybe yes, maybe no, but there's
Yep.
definitely some component of it. So
hmm
are we looking at eating disorders as like there are things that we can do that actually can prevent a development of a disease reality for a patient?
I believe so. Yeah, definitely. I think there's similar to these other chronic conditions you've named. Um, there's it's all about lowering risk.
Okay.
Um, there, I come from a public health background, so all we do is think about risk. And so there, certainly we can say with some confidence that increasing intake of certain foods may increase your risk of a certain condition given family history or given recent trajectory of lab work. So I similarly with eating disorders, I think there's definitely room for us to reduce risk. Um, yeah.
Okay.
hmm
So let's take that then and
Yeah.
say, what are some of the things we know that reduce the risk of someone developing an eating disorder? And maybe before I do that, can we talk a little bit of statistics about percentage of people? And I want to talk about women and when I'm
Mhm.
talking because of our podcast being primarily about motherhood and women's health issues or women's mental health. But I also want to acknowledge that boys and men develop eating disorders as well. So what are the rates of women and eating disorders in terms of when most women will develop an eating disorder age wise? What are some of the initiating factors? Talk to me about the data.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the data is good, and now I'm wishing I had this figure off the top of my head. Um, most most people who develop eating disorders will develop it earlier in life, like earlier than like initial signs and symptoms may show in the teens and early 20s. But that does not mean people do not begin getting diagnosed later in life too. Actually, become more aware of that myself, just noticing how my client load has changed over the years to
Mm,
include people at later stages in life too. So, and it's hard because eating disorders are very underdiagnosed, especially in different ethnic groups. Eating disorders can just really fly under the radar. So I tend to think that the figure we have of people with diagnosed eating disorders is probably too low.
really?
I think more people have experienced disordered eating than we know. And that definitely goes for men and boys. It's just not something that has historically been talked about, and or support for that has not been normalized yet,
Mm,
in my opinion.
hmm hmm
Yeah, but um, the I'll stop there because I don't want to misquote a rate, but I will definitely get you that information.
Okay, just it was just curiosity.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's not
yeah.
like it's not rare. Let's put it that way. I think it's
No,
very
not
much
at all.
not a rare diagnosis. Okay, so
No.
talk to me a bit about some of the preventative measures, the things that we know work when it comes to eating disordered behavior.
Yes,
Well,
well,
let's not the preventative or like reducing of risk.
yeah. Well, if we're talking about reducing risk, especially, my mind jumps to like children and teens. Like this is
Mhm,
really where parents can have such a positive impact on raising children and teens to become adults who do not have to experience maybe any sort of distress with eating. So that would be keeping a positive food environment in the home, having zero tolerance for things like fat phobia or negative body talk or judgment of other people's bodies. Those two things really stand out to me. And I think it's important to name that a positive food environment can maybe be hard to come by for some families. And so this does not have to mean serving top of the line, like elaborate meals. Every food under the sun is available, but it's more about creating positive experiences while eating, celebrating food for the role that it plays, not just in maintaining our physical health, but also culture and um, celebrating milestones and sort of the just the multifunctional role food has.
mhm.
Um, and as well, going back to that zero tolerance for fat phobia.
So positive food environment is interesting because when you said positive food environment, my brain went right to the psychological component of how we talk about food or weight or food or weight management. Didn't go at all into the how do we prepare food or how do we use food on a regular basis. So I think we want to break this down. So a positive food environment from a practical, technical, you're saying variety of foods available, celebrating foods that are valuable to our cultures. Um, Give me more. Give me more about what
Yeah.
positive food environment is.
Totally. Yes. Well, I actually think it does include what you're talking about too, which with that psychological element, which is first and foremost, not demonizing food or putting food on a hierarchy. So kind of dropping as much as possible the good and bad labels that food kind of picks up
Hmm
with just today's media. So trying to neutralize food and talk about food for its function or maybe its flavor, and the role it's playing like at the meal or at this event versus this is a good food or that food is bad for you. So it's zooming out and trying to drop those labels for sure. And then family meals together as much as possible, whatever's realistic for your own family, but using food as a way to gather and keep conversation not about food, but using food as a vehicle for connection. Um, and when I mean variety, again, I think within what's realistic and what's reasonable, but maybe I'm also thinking about being responsive to your child's needs and preferences. So whether it's mom only thinks the family should eat these three very low calorie foods, or is it kid also requests sauce on the chicken, or kid also requests ice cream, and can the parent be responsive to that versus I lay the rules and we only eat like XYZ. So when I'm thinking about positive food environments, so those are some of the things I think about.
Yeah. Okay. So I really want to get granular with this because I think
Yeah.
this is where parents, especially if you come from a home environment or a childhood environment where there wasn't positive, healthy food perspectives, right?
Hmm.
You really have no idea what you're talking about. You
Yeah.
can I can hear you speak and I can say, I'm not sure what that actually sounds like. So for example, a child says, I don't like chicken unless it's fried, right? I love this kind of chicken with, I'm going to go with fried food, right? I like deep fried breaded chicken versus the kind that mom's making, which is healthier. That might be the term in the home, or
Mhm.
that's just not fried and is baked. And the child's like, well, I don't like that kind of chicken. What would a healthy food environment sound like in a home that
Mhm.
is like top of mind?
Yeah, well, first, I think it depends on the age of the child, like how you talk about it. But maybe I'll frame it this way first. Like the research does show us that what we call an authoritative feeding environment is really beneficial for kids. So authoritative um, means uh, it means like there's structure, but there's high responsiveness. It doesn't mean there's no responsive, meaning we're super rigid, and it also doesn't mean no structure, which means child is leading everything. So what we're looking for is an environment where child knows to expect meals, generally knows when and where they will be eaten. This is like communicated to the child, and also is responsive within reason to what the child can has the capacity for. So we know like kids who are, I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I'm still really new to the parenting thing, but I've been working in this field for a lot longer than that. So I know that children are going to respond to what they feel they have autonomy over. So if you're serving like really bland food to a 3-year-old, this and food that they have to, maybe that's very like chewy or highly textured, and the textures are super varied within the meal. This is not something they will necessarily feel they have autonomy over. They might have to like have food cut for them. They might have every time they take a bite, it might taste different. And so they're probably going to respond a little less positively to that. And so I'm thinking about like if mom or dad really wants to cook chicken a very specific way, the first question is it within the child's capacity? Meaning like
Mm,
developmentally, are they going to think this is a bit yummy and appealing, or developmentally, are they going to find this pretty challenging? Um, so that's kind of like the first thing I would just encourage parents to look at, because they are the ones providing the structure and providing the meals, and that is their role, right? It should not be totally child-led. But if a child is coming in and saying, I had fried chicken and it was so good. Can we eat it at home? I do think a responsive approach would be to say, I hear you. Like, let me try and figure out a time for us to have that, and to make sure that actually happens.
Meaning
Mhm.
it's okay to be able to say like we're not going to have chicken, we're not going to have fried chicken every night, but I'm happy to bring it in once a week, once every 2 weeks or whatever. We're going to definitely make it part of our repertoire if that's something that you enjoyed.
Yes, exactly. And I
Okay.
would might encourage parents to try not to say like, because fried chicken is unhealthy, we don't eat it all the time at home. But I
Right.
do think it's totally reasonable to say, oh my gosh, it's a little hard to prepare. That's tough for a weeknight. I have this recipe that gets chicken on the table super fast. So if you can be patient, let's work together to make fried chicken on Saturday. Like this is a way to communicate to the child, like as the adult, I do most of the meal planning, but I'm
Right.
excited to hear that you have an interest in helping
Okay.
me meal plan.
Okay, so I want to push back a little bit and I want to
Sure.
challenge you and I want to hear how you can like tease this apart for me. So
Hmm.
you have, on one hand, I think I'm in agreement with everything you're saying. Not
Yeah.
that you need to be, but I am. But if I always wonder about, so where do our children learn that fried chicken has, is high in fat, is high caloric, kind of can have the calories that you really need for the entire day that could clog your arteries. Like, where do our children learn that in a way that is safe and not punitive, that is not like good and bad, but like, how do we convey that to, and I would suggest like, I want to move that into like tweens where I want to move us into a space where we know that our kids are getting messages from elsewhere. So where do we as parents set that kind of, you talked about it as authoritative, which isn't exactly just, I am the authority and I'm in charge, but how do we navigate education, right? How do we teach our children about nutrition without falling into the same patterns of previous generations, which is like, this is bad for you, right? This is going to clog your arteries.
Yes, it's such a good question. Yes, first and foremost, that is safe for the tween years, because that's when they're taking those types of complex concepts and really like starting to apply them to like choices they're making. Before then, kids are really present oriented. It's not about reducing risk. They're sort of like, is it in front of me? Is it something I like? That's what I'm gonna, that's where they're coming from.
Right.
Um, I would try to encourage people to save some of some of those nutrition science facts, like fried chicken is higher in fat, and what does our body do with fat? Where is fat really useful? Where is fat maybe not as useful? Those conversations definitely for a little bit of later years. Um, but it's a really good question. And so when people have asked me this in the past, sometimes I ask them back, when you were that age, what did you care about? What do you remember being told about food at that age? It's just speaking for myself. I can't recall what nutrition information I was given at that
Hmm.
time. And I don't think I was making decisions based off of nutrition science at that age. Um, and by that age, I'm guessing I'm sort of meaning like an older kid, maybe before they're a teen, so maybe middle school. I'm making decisions based off of, is it something I've had before? Does it look yummy? Does it taste yummy? Do my friends eat it? That's kind of what mattered. Whether someone said, but you shouldn't eat that because it's really high in calories, like way over my head, sort of like, well, come on,
And
So
okay, that's
that's
interesting
what,
because
yeah,
I think because of social media that has
yeah,
changed, right?
yes,
So
yes.
you're of an age that you had I'm sure some exposure to social media, but not necessarily in the way that our current sixth, seventh, and eighth graders are
Hmm.
experiencing. Like, it's so ridiculous, but I'll hear the kids say something like the UV rays today are an 11, and I'm like,
Hmm.
why do you know the UV rays? And they think that
Hmm.
they're calculating whether they should put on sunscreen or how much sunscreen they need to put on. It's ridiculous. Um, and also, I recognize that therefore there's a flood of knowledge that is unfiltered, right? It's knowledge they're getting, but not necessarily filtered through wisdom or like, how do I make sense of this information? Right. And so that's what makes me curious about like when it comes down to food. I would absolutely have seen middle schoolers who are like, well, that's fattening, or well, my friends told me not to eat that because it is so high in sodium. Like, what do you know about sodium? Right.
Yes, and you actually bring up such a good point, which is that the information is becoming so readily available at a younger age, and from people who are not really,
Qualified
yeah, professionals in
at
the topic.
all. Right.
Yeah, but that is exactly what I would recommend, how you just responded there. Like, well, what do you know about sodium? Like, what do you think they're trying to say when they say it's bad for you? Like, just curiosity. Again, I don't think it's necessarily like I must counterattack with a lot of facts, but hey, this is a safe place for you to bring me information that you've heard, and let's just think about it together. And yeah, as age appropriate, if someone is like, they said that food is so high in sodium, it's so bad for you. We can't eat chips in this house anymore. Like if a teen says that to a
Right.
parent, which I'm
Right.
sure absolutely
Absolutely.
happens, the parent can say, well, in this house, here's how we think about what health is. We bring in lots of different kinds of foods. We don't only eat one type of food. Um, you're right, sodium is something that balances water in the body. If we have too much of it, that can change the balance of water in our body. But here's how we make sure we don't have too much of it. We also eat vegetables. We also eat meats. We also eat XYZ, right? So we don't have to counterattack with so many hard facts that suddenly they're like, I don't know who's right or wrong. But I definitely think it's good for children to feel like they can talk to their parents about it and that there's some safety in the conversation.
Hmm.
Um, I know, growing up, so many generations have been impacted by diet culture in different ways. But like when I was growing up, the parental generation was very fearful of fats and carbs. And it became, I think, very taboo to even express that you would like those foods. So, we're not going to stop people from enjoying palatable food. So I think it's especially kids and teens. So I think it's letting them know that they can talk to the parent about it, and that if the child has a concern, like I'm concerned our family is eating too much sodium, that they can talk to their parent about it, and maybe together they can come up with a comfortable solution.
I want to address as a therapist, just acknowledging that these conversations can be very difficult for parents that have their own history of eating um, eating disordered behaviors, right? Like not necessarily an eating disorder, but like disordered eating behaviors. Or I think more so, I really question whether women today even are aware of how their voices are really influencing their children in a very negative and unsafe way, right? So I love that you say like come back to me, we could talk about it. And I'm thinking how many women I know wouldn't know what to say, right? They wouldn't have the basic nutritional knowledge or wouldn't have some of the language to respond to a kid who says, "Well, I'm not eating carbs because carbs are bad for you," right? If as a nutritionist, as a dietitian, can you give our parents that are listening some of the wording that you would use when a child says, carbs are really bad for you, and I'm going to be cutting out carbs for a month. Like, what do we say to our kids who are repeating it from somebody else who's doing it, obviously? But what do you want them to hear from the parent?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think I would try to lower the stakes for the parent that the minute your child says that to you, you don't have to have the answer right away and or you don't have to have decided how you'll all handle it right then and there. If the child is coming to you, that's an opening and it's going to be a much longer conversation, maybe over days, weeks, months. So if a child is coming saying, I'm not eating carbs anymore, right then and there is not the time to, I mean, it's so scary. I mean, as a newer parent myself, I've had my 3-year-old has already said, I'm not eating vegetables. So I get it. I mean, I understand sort of that. Oh my gosh, I have to fix that. But no, right then and there, it's just to be curious. Wow, something really scared you. Tell me more about where you heard that. What did they sound like when they said it? What types of carbs are you already eating? How do you think you would feel if you didn't have them anymore? It doesn't have to be, okay, we've decided if you will or not at the end of this conversation, but just again, opening it up. But I think longer term, um, that is an opportunity, like with a little space from that initial scary moment to say, hey, I wanted to go back to something you said about not wanting to eat carbs. Do you know what carbs do for your body? Like, has anyone ever talked to you really about what they do? And you can go from there. You could say, I understand it's really scary to hear that something is bad for you. Maybe the way we think about like something is poisonous, but I want to clarify like the difference in that language. Is something poisonous and threatening to your health, or what are like that type of
Hmm.
conversation. We can
Hmm.
hopefully get to a place where we can say, like, I understand it really scared you. My job as your parent is to keep, supporting your physical health. These are the types of carbs we eat at home. These are the types of carbs you could eat outside of the home. Um, but like, I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't have to know right and then and there, like how to
Oh, I
solve
think
that.
it's great advice. I think it's great advice.
Yeah.
It'd be like, and I
Yeah.
think we actually naturally go right towards solution. Be like, well, in our house, we versus
Hmm.
being like, tell me more about where did that come from? And it's
Hmm.
always going to come from their friends or social media, right? It's going to
Hmm.
come from their friends.
Hmm.
Um, I want to hear from your experience working with teenagers and young women now. What is the messaging that they are hearing from social media? What is that influence right now? 2026, July, what are we hearing? What are our young ones hearing? Because the older women are going to hear their own algorithm. Mine
Hmm.
is full of GLP-1 information and lack of information and lots of memes and jokes about, diet, but totally different experience than what our teenagers are going to hear. So, what is the algorithm teaching our tweens and teens about food, nutrition, and fat culture?
Yes. Okay. A lot about protein, a lot about there's a lot of what I eat in a day type of content. And for I think there's a special section for like where the fitness culture comes in, where it's all about like building
Mm,
muscle, being really lean and muscular, and that type of body type. So that comes in with like again with the emphasis on protein and probably lack of information on the role carbohydrates play in sports nutrition. Definitely the thin body ideal is like back in the mainstream, or maybe just even more in the mainstream than it had been. So that's
yeah.
the type of content they're definitely getting.
Yeah. Thin body idea. Like I feel like we had come so far. Do you blame
Mhm.
it on the GLP-1s? Do you blame it on the Ozempic culture?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I blame it. It's hard to pinpoint exactly like one culprit. I mean, I blame it on just general, um, like the industry, like uh, I will say GLP-1s, I think. there's such a valid medication for many people, right? Like the original use of GLP-1s for diabetes is really effective and really
Yeah,
life-changing. So
yeah,
I have learned, like as a dietitian working with people with eating disorders, to really keep a balanced as much as possible keep a balanced place or like keep a balanced perspective. That's the word I'm looking for about GLP-1s because I know that they can really change people's lives for the better if it's, indicated for them. At the same time, I think too many prescriptions are being handed out. Not enough people are being evaluated for the safety of GLP-1s for them. And I think more often than not, uh, it is normalizing the thin ideal in a way that like just wasn't as possible before. It's really, really tricky. I also am a diabetes educator, so I do work with people who are on GLP-1s for their diabetes management. Um, and at the same time, and I have people who are recovering from an eating disorder who are so curious about them, but know that for their own safety, it's not something that they can use. So it just really complicates eating disorder
yeah.
treatment recovery in general.
Yeah, I just feel like because it's become such a prolific conversation, I feel like we backslid, like we slid back. Like there was a backslide. I forget what word I'm looking for, but there was a huge backslide from fat is, fat can be beautiful or, healthy at every size. And all of a sudden that conversation is no longer relevant because, well, you don't have to be fat anymore. You could just take your medication. And I want to and I'm not I want to be very clear. I'm a big supportive fan of these medications because of all the things you just talked about. But I also think that it shifted the conversation of right back to what it was probably 20 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago of, well, you don't have to be fat now, you could be skinny, and therefore we don't have to talk about inclusive, even some of the larger size women who were big influencers all are no longer larger size influencers. It's interesting to see that. Um, when we think about I want to hear you talk in the same way we talked about health, kind of a health focus in the home. Talk to me what you said and to no fat phobia. Talk a little bit about what that sounds like from the child, and then what does that actually sound like from the parent? What's the counterculture to that?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sort of the zero tolerance for fat phobia. So it depends again how old the child is, but starting from an early age, that curiosity will begin. Like this person looks different from this person, maybe in different ways. This person's hair is this way and not this way. Uh, and body size will be a natural part of that curiosity. So I think at an early childhood years, it's about saying, yeah, some bodies are bigger and some bodies are smaller. Isn't that cool? Neutral, short facts. And once once they get older and probably start to hear more judgmental language, um, I think depending on how you talk about things in your family, but I think it's okay to say, "Oh, that didn't sound like it was a kind thing to say. How did it make you feel when you heard it, or how did it make you feel when you said it?" If child calls themselves fat, I think it's really important to pause and try very hard not to jump into that righting reflex of, "No, you're not," which I did I presented to some families recently, and I kind of asked, "What would you say if your child said I'm fat?" And the first response was, "No, you're not." And I asked, "Why? Why is that the first one?" I'm trying to comfort them. And in that comfort, I think children are hearing, wow, fat is something I shouldn't even say. It was something my mom would be so scared if I was. She'd be horrified if I thought I was. And it just creates a larger narrative. So in that moment, if a child is saying, "I'm fat," you could say, um, just again lead with that curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
What does fat mean? Do you see other people with your body type? Have you ever seen someone with your body type? Just kind of go there and let them process that experience that they're having.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then speak highly or neutrally about your own body. I think that's really, really important and really difficult, because by the time women are having children, their bodies are changing themselves and they're dealing with, um, yeah, it's just a major transitional moment in their own life. But I think as much as possible to model function of body or respect of one's body or gratitude for one's body, is great for just creating that positive environment at home. Gosh, I could go on. There's so many more, in terms of trying to not compliment appearance over things like effort. So, if you're trying to tell your child they look amazing, they look beautiful, of course, everyone thinks that and wants to say that to their child and should freely, but also, you took such special care in picking that outfit today. I just want to tell you, like, it's really popping. Like, you look awesome in it. Or I like how you experimented with your hair. Or like, you were running so fast today. Like, I can't believe your legs have just grown so much since you were little. Like, just trying to connect it with something other than just appearance,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
can be really helpful. So those are just some of my quick ideas. There are more,
I
I'm
think they're
sure.
really important. I mean, I'm happy to take more from you, but like I also think I want to hear, I would love for you to name some of the things that women say about themselves or that they don't even realize is promoting a negative culture in the home.
Yeah. Yes. One of the most common things I hear, and it's really tricky for parents, I want to really acknowledge this, is if their own child is going through an eating disorder recovery, and likely needing to weight restore, at the same time, the parent feels that they're needing to lose weight. It's a really, and I just get a lot of private conversations with parents, not in front of the child, of course, where the parent is saying, the child wants me to finish my croissant because they have to finish their croissant, but I'm trying to
Ooh,
I'm trying to lose weight. Should I tell them my metabolism is different from theirs or, yada, yada, yada. So
right, right,
I,
right.
I always tell parents, what they do with their bodies, 100% their business. They're not my client, right? Um, and my hope is that they find a place where they feel comfortable in their relationship with food and body.
Sure.
Um, but I think it's really easy for parents to say something like, well, my metabolism is as fast as yours, so I have to eat a little bit less. I think that's probably the number one thing because they think it's bringing it back to science. It is. Um,
But not so
but
much.
it's sending a kind of like a tricky message.
Okay.
Um, but I do think there is really an importance in drawing boundaries. Like, everyone is in charge of their own body. So that is something that I think we can replace this language with of like, well, I'm older than you, my metabolism is a bit different. Um, is just saying, this is the amount that feels good to my body today. How much feels good to your body? And
Which
so
is
it's
tricky
not,
in eating disorder recovery, by the way.
of
Right?
course, yes,
Like
yes,
that's like
yes.
you can't do that. She's not in charge of her body when I'm telling her she needs to eat this and this and this, right? So we have to acknowledge like that's so tricky. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not
But in a
exactly right.
typical non-eating disordered recovery space,
Hmm.
when a
Hmm.
child is saying, "Why aren't you eating that?" or "Why don't you have more?" or whatever, so the parental voice is everybody's going to be in charge. Everyone's in charge of their own body and what feels good in their own body.
Hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, because you're right. If the household has no eating disorder present, the goal at that point is really to teach the child to become attuned to their own body. So it's not nutritional perfection. It's not every macro is being hit precisely at every meal. It's how attuned are you to your body, and can you continue to become more attuned as you grow?
Hmm.
So that is language that's really, I think, helpful. It's like, did that feel good to your body? Um, After this meal, is your belly full and happy? Like, or are you going to get hungry again soon? Like, just
Hmm.
trying to connect the child to their body. Of course,
Hmm.
in the eating disorder recovery, it's different. And I think there's specific language one could use in those cases. Um, but yeah, it's again just trying to teach children, teach teens that they are in charge of their own body and that their body can really tell them what they need, just as mom's body can tell her what she needs.
Is there
Um,
anything else you're hearing that where moms or dads, kind of
mhm.
make a mistake in how they're talking about food or their body? I want to hear from you, like where they're missing it. They're not realizing that they're imparting a negative message.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really easy to say things like, "Oh, I shouldn't have." That's just so easy. I mean, very easy. Maybe you got too full, and it goes into like, I shouldn't have done that," without even
Hmm.
any like negative meaning behind it. But it's just something that kids
Mm.
will hear over and over again. So, trying to move away from the shoulds, I should have, or I should not have, and moving into the attunement language, which is, oh, my body got a little full after that meal. It was so yummy, but I'm a little too full. Like,
Hmm.
kind of just keeping it to
Hmm.
that. Again, modeling that you can learn things from what your body tells you. You don't have to feel guilt about it.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head. Um,
I want to give you an option. I want to give you,
yeah,
I want to talk about when you're taking your kids to the dressing rooms, right? And they're
yeah,
trying on
sure.
clothing. What are you
Yeah.
thinking when you're looking at a child's trying on clothing and you're like, oh, I'm not sure that that looks good on them, or I'm wondering how she feels in her body in that, like, what are some of the things that, see, I've been in dressing rooms. I've actually
Yeah.
disrespected the dressing room attendants and said things like, you need to think twice before you say that to a teenager of like, this one is more flattering on you. Like this makes you look more thin. Like, how dare you? Like, how dare you as a shopkeeper, or a store clerk, make a comment like that to a teenager? And she was like, oh my God, I had no awareness of that at all. And I was like, I mean, I was nice about it, but also my daughter was gonna like kill me for saying it out loud. But I was like, no, somebody's got to teach you. Like, you can't say that to teenagers. But I'm watching other women and moms saying things like, no, this doesn't fit you right, or this doesn't look good on you, or this doesn't, I don't think it's flattering, or it's too tight, or too small, or too whatever. I'm wondering in those spaces, what do we hear moms saying that you're like, oh, don't say that out loud?
Hmm. Oh, I mean, I think it's those things that are coming from a place of wanting to protect their child. Of, yeah, I think it all comes from a place of protection and their own lived experience. So exactly what you just said. Oh, this one's a bit more flattering, or like, I don't know if this one is like, this kind of accentuating the wrong part, or, I'm using quotes. Um, uh, because I think that's coming from, I want you to be accepted. Like,
Mm.
you
Wait,
know,
pause, because I think that is like such an important thing. Because then you're looking at the parent-child dynamic. I want you to feel accepted.
Mhm,
Like, I want you to not be embarrassed,
mhm,
right? I want you to be accepted among your friends in a positive way, right? Where honestly, most of our children would say the same priority, right? They would say, yeah, me too. But the parent is overshadowing that directly. That's so, yeah, I appreciate
mhm.
that so much.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks for pointing that out. I think that might be what's happening a lot of times. And again, I think it comes to that pause before you jump in. And just maybe even notice how the teen is looking at themselves, or did their demeanor change when they put this outfit on versus the next? And I think those are the things that parents can really support with. Like, I noticed you were really excited to put that other dress on and you're not as excited about this one. What's going on for you? Like,
Mhm.
tell me what, and maybe there is something about body image that's coming up, and this can be an opportunity to kind of open the door.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think if you are a parent who really does want to, you know, maybe your teen really wants your opinion,
Right.
and you are happy to give it, I would still try and shy away from language like flattering or makes you look thin, and maybe something like that that really brings out your like that looks like you, like this makes you look like you, or like, um, you know, I think things like color can be really, this color just makes you look like so alive and, and ready to go. And this color I think doesn't like match as well. Like I think there are ways you can go about it that are not about the body shape and size.
Right. I
Hmm.
like it. I mean, I like the terminology of how do you feel in it, right? How does this
Hmm.
make you feel? Like, it looks
Hmm.
like you feel good in your body, or you look like you feel happy in how this feels on you, then that's a win, right? Then that's a
Hmm.
winning outfit.
Yeah.
I find that a lot. Yeah. Sometimes we're really countering some of those negative messages from culture and community and stores, unfortunately, that are really, really challenging.
Hmm.
Um, any other things that you're thinking about that we haven't mentioned in terms of parenting? And I guess maybe I want to take a couple minutes and just talk about like nourishing the woman's own sense of self and perspective of self, especially with body changes, postpartum, pregnancy, et cetera, or just aging, right? Like the normal stuff, right? And how we have to confront perhaps some of those childhood messages, right? I meet so many women in their 40s who spent years in Weight Watchers, ages 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? Or Jenny Craig, or some of these, weight loss programs that were sold to us from a very young age. And like nobody ever really countered that culture of that wasn't okay. And I think sometimes we're really kind of coming to an awareness of how negatively impact, like how much it shaped the way we think of our bodies and we think of our bodies in society, right? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, it makes me think that um that generation that you're speaking of is doing really hard work of breaking a cycle. of doing both healing themselves and trying to break a cycle. And I think it's just important to name like how challenging and how much daily work that is.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, getting support, talking to friends, talking to other people about it is, I think, really important. Um, and just giving, I mean, I think anyone trying to break a cycle has to give themselves tons of grace that they're not going to do it perfectly.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think it's about like naming, like, if you can heal parts of your relationship with your own body and with food, that you can more effectively break the cycle for your child.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that you're allowed to do like the learning and the healing alongside you teaching your child. Like it's okay that it's all happening at the same time. Like I think um, some people have this deadline. Like I'd like to feel amazing about my relationship with food and body before my kid is born or before my kid is 10 or something, and suddenly it just becomes really a high pressure situation. So
Hmm.
I think it's just you're allowed to be doing that work alongside your child. And I think the breaking the cycle can be really healing as well, but a lot of work.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think what
mhm,
you're saying is also like you need to do the work, right? I think if there's
yeah.
one statement here that we haven't formally said is like, I think there's a lot of women who have no idea that they have work to do.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of women that still believe the stories. And so, they might be like, yeah, 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 I'm very comfortable at this size, but that there's a part of them that still really deeply struggles with their body and the way they feel about themselves, the way they look. And that shame voice, I think, is so loud so many years later. And I think confronting that shame voice, I once heard a dietitian, she was a psychologist who specializes in obesity management. She said, how's that working for you now? Like, how is that shaming voice? And like, if you could only, and if I only did this, and I should have done, she's like, how's that voice working for you? Right? That shaming voice hasn't really been motivating, right? Most people are not motivated long term from shame. And so maybe we kind of, we think about like there is work to be done, especially in a generation of women that maybe the things that were taught to them were transgenerational or were just the culture of the time in which we grew up, right? And how we have a responsibility to change that conversation with our kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
What else are you thinking about when we're having this discussion about women and mothering?
Hmm. Yeah, I think actually, as you were talking, it just was making me think about how much pressure there really is on women and mothers to, especially in the feeding domain. Just the grocery shopping, the meal planning. It's just society still, I think, and even though many families, I think, try to break that dynamic, it's still so heavily weighted on the mother.
Mhm.
To be in charge of all of the food. And
I
it
love
just made
that.
me think about that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so just adding on to the work for sure. But and so within that, I think I definitely wanted to say w children are really resilient. Like their physical health is resilient. This is amazing. And as much as even I, as a mom of young one, and have talked to moms weekly at the playground about things like ice cream. The ice cream truck is going by. Every kid wants it. These are just like daily thoughts and conversations I'm having with people just outside of work. Um, that we don't have to get it perfect to raise healthy eaters. That really are the work is to keep them in touch with their body and let them explore,
Hmm.
and let them have autonomy when appropriate around food. And that the meals the mom and dad prepares at home does not have to be, again, nutritionally perfect every single time in
Hmm.
order to accomplish those other things. The goal by the time they go off to college or move out of the home is that they can understand how food influences them and impacts them, how it makes them feel, and that they know they can get their needs met through a lot of different foods. That
Hmm.
will set them up as a young adult. They're still developing and learning, but that will start to set them up for things like the skills of independent cooking and eating socially and needing to be spontaneous and managing work schedules and food, right? That's all later, but the work right now is not to say every single meal has a protein and every single meal has a vegetable. It's sort of to drive conversation and curiosity about those things. Again, we're speaking from someone, if your child is, medically stable and doesn't have other pre-existing conditions, but that in general can be accomplished by being open-minded and not trying to force perfection on the child and the parent.
And I think that's the definition of a healthy eater, right? If
Yeah.
that is my job, right? If my job, I actually I would say to you, like, it's not, that is healthy eating, right?
Hmm.
Healthy eating is everything you just described. Healthy eating isn't just protein, starch, and a vegetable, right? Like, healthy eating is a much wider view or lens with which to see food and nutrition and that interaction with body and all the other things that go along with it. So I would say, yeah, healthy eaters, but we can do that in many other ways other than just what we're putting on their plate. Right? I think you're saying that,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfectly summarized. Yeah, that healthy eating is such a is really that broad description, not
Yeah.
I've hit my fiber goal every day.
Right, right. I think also, I just want to mention, I think it's really important for people to think about where you're getting good information, right? Like, I've seen people who are promoting a lot of supplements, a lot of like guidelines and things like that. Um, First and foremost, I think I personally learn best from people. So, like, I think that, reaching out to a registered dietitian, which is different, by the way, than a nutritionist, just for clarification. Anybody can call themselves a dietitian, but with like a couple
Nutritionist.
of weeks
Mhm.
of a nutritionist, thank you, with a few weeks of training, or a course. But a registered dietitian is typically master's level, would we say? A bachelor's,
Yeah,
master's?
now it has
Yeah,
to be master's level, but yes, we're
master's level.
all like clinically supervised and mhm.
Exactly. Like a
Yeah.
real educated person who comes to you with current research and data. Hires, even, I don't think that the goal is take your kid to a dietitian. Take yourself to a dietitian. Learn the language of how to create everything that Eling was just talking about today. Like, learn how to incorporate that messaging in your home. But the teaching is for me. The teaching is the adult. And our children will learn based on what I put out there in the family system. So is there any other recommendation in terms of somebody says, well, I'm not hiring a dietitian right now, or I can't, or whatever. Any other websites that you're like, or influencers online? I acknowledge that they hold a lot of power. Like, anybody that you're like, this person actually puts out good stuff.
Yeah, yes, totally. I one of my favorite online resources right now is Burnt Toast. It's a
Hmm.
Substack. Um, and the author talks all about how to talk to your kids about diet culture, how to it kind of helps parents identify where diet culture has leaked into many unassuming places. Yeah, the author's name is Virginia. I just want to Virginia Soul Smith.
Okay.
And she really comes from a body liberation perspective. So I just think, again, the learning is for the parent, like you said. I love how you said that. Like, this is all about the parent getting information, new perspectives, and learning for themselves.
Amazing.
So Burnt Toast is great because it's focused on parents and families. Kids
Okay.
Eat in Color is is an Instagram account.
I've heard of that one.
And she's a
Hmm.
dietitian who, yeah, just kind of like gives ideas and uh, normalizes a variety of ways of eating. But she definitely, one of her favorite, a series she does is is always like pictures of babies eating broccoli, like reader submitted photos of kids eating broccoli, and kind of saying like it
Amazing.
doesn't have to be hard to expose your child to different foods. And so I think she does a good job. She's,
Mhm.
yeah, Kids Eat in Color.
Fantastic. I remember
Mhm.
once when my kids were very little, and my husband this was like a trick that he would say, oh no, you don't want this. This is for adults. And it was like it was a black bean chorizo soup. He was like, you
Yeah.
don't want to eat it. It's too spicy. And the kids were like, no, we really want it. And he got all of my young children to
Mhm.
eat black bean chorizo soup. So it has always been a trick in our home to be like, you don't want it. It's too spicy. And only daddy's going to eat this. And then, of course, they line up with their bowls and eat all different forms of interesting foods. So I think there's many different ways we get our kids to try some interesting things. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you. I think the time
Thanks,
just flew. We
Dvora.
covered so much.
Yeah.
We will also tag where people can find you if they want to seek you out for nutritional counseling. I love your wisdom, and I just appreciate you sharing it with all of us today. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having this conversation with me, Dvora. It was so fun.
My pleasure.